Hello, and welcome to the second installment of the Teaching Teachers with Technology, or T3 webinar series supported by the GAR Foundation. Earlier this year, we had our first webinar that emphasized best practices for transitioning from surviving to thriving in a year like no other. We are now at or near the end of that year, thankfully. I want to use this time to focus on self-care and teachers right before they leave for the summer for some much needed time to refresh, refuel, and refocus. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Just a couple of introductions. I'm Eric Ling. I've taught for 13 years at Cuyahoga Valley Christian Academy, where I currently serve as the director of the School of Business and Entrepreneurship. I teach AP Economics, and I'm transitioning to Dean of Faculty next year. I've written and received an EIG grant through the GAR Foundation and currently serve on the grant-making committee for the EIG program at GAR. Also joining me to my right, I'm not sure where she's at on the squares, is Angela Harper. Angela is an elementary school principal at Mason Community Learning Center, which is in the Akron Public Schools. She's written and received an EIG grant through the GAR Foundation and currently serves on the grant-making committee for the EIG program at GAR. Also joining me is Dr. Rick Ferdig. Dr. Ferdig is the Summit Professor of Learning Technologies and Professor of Educational Technology at Kent State University. His research interests include online education, educational games and simulations, the relationship between faith and technology, and what he labels a deeper psychology of technology. And then finally, our leader is Lucille Esposito. Lucille is the program manager for the EIG process through the GAR Foundation. She's a retired assistant superintendent and has been a teacher with having taught grades 3 through 12 and at the college level. It is an absolute honor and privilege to serve with these wonderful educators and thinkers that desire to give so generously of their time and expertise in this series. So welcome. Okay, let's get started. As many of you know, prior to the COVID, the GAR Foundation hosted an educator conference designed to inspire and equip educators to impact students with innovative practices and through renewed perspectives. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the GAR Foundation will not be hosting that conference this year. However, we are excited to announce that we will continue to pursue this same mission through offering several more webinars in this series next year. For example, in the early fall, we'll have a webinar that focuses on taking these SEL practices we're talking about today and applying them to students. We'll also have another webinar in January that will focus on helping teachers finalize their GAR EIG grants. It's a lot of acronyms there. We'll continue to offer additional topics based on feedback from our attendees on the survey at the end. Speaking of the survey, please stick around until the end and complete the survey. We will give you time during our session, so it won't take more of your time to complete this. Not only does this give us really valuable feedback and informs our future webinars, but it also is how you will receive your CEU for attending today's session. Got to get that professional development. All right, so today's webinar is focused on self-care and teachers, a timely topic to say the least. We will define self-care and we'll talk about why it's so important. There's much to discuss, but very limited time, so we'll be focusing on doing 3 basic things. First, we'll address 3 key strategies for teachers over the summer, and in doing so, we will highlight multiple areas, at least 5, that overlap with engaging our students. We will also introduce GAR EIG grant recipients who have built projects in Summit County. We're very excited to feature these teachers and that are trying to address some of the issues we're talking about today. We are purposefully introducing them so that webinar attendees, you guys, can get connected to existing people and projects that can positively impact your work. And then finally, we'll be introducing a way at the end for our attendees to build upon the work introduced and actually earn up to 2 additional CEUs to continue their exploration of existing content over the summer. As such, we'll be ending with time for you to complete a brief survey, which is where you will register again to earn that original CEU. With our limited time today, we want to pack as much in as possible. So we are not going to be making time for questions during the session. However, our panel will be sticking around after you finish your survey. Please join us and ask any questions that you have. Okay, introductions are over. We're ready to get started. I'd like to turn it over to Rick. Rick, what do we know about self-care, which is often connected to SEL, and why is it so important for our teachers?
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. Care pedagogy, in a nutshell, is what researchers call the strategies that foster care and nurture in education, specifically focusing on the relationship between teachers and students, and also seeing the students as a whole person. And so today we're going to follow that mindset, but we're going to focus on seeing not only the students as a whole person, but also the teachers as a whole person. And to do that, I want to use one of my favorite pastoral metaphors, breathing. Now, this is something I'm sure you've seen 1,000 times. People will talk about proper breathing and the importance of breathing in fully and then exhaling fully. So why is this important? Well, when we don't breathe properly, in addition to passing out, we have problems ranging from insomnia to heart palpitations. But one of the most common outcomes is an increase in stress. Now, we could spend a lot of time today simply talking about that topic because breathing is actually a really good strategy teachers can use and teachers can teach students to use to de-stress. Many of you have already done that. As a matter of fact, here's a great cartoon Angela shared with me about the importance of breathing for geek meditation sessions. And I need to learn this the next time I'm teaching and my technology fails me. So, but in all seriousness, breathing is incredibly important. But I don't want to focus on breathing as a topic. I actually want to focus on breathing as a metaphor for teaching and teachers. So part of care pedagogy is recognizing that teaching is a process of breathing in and breathing out. Breathing out is often what we see from teachers. They spend their time and energy teaching, helping, mentoring students, but they also need time to breathe in. And breathing in is the time and space necessary to learn, to explore, and perhaps most importantly, to refresh and renew one's energy and passion. And I think this is a great metaphor because both are critical to supporting the whole teacher. Unfortunately, however, given the events of the last 14 months, most teachers have had to expend all their energy breathing out. In addition to their normal teaching duties, COVID has introduced new demands on their time at work and home. And guess what happened? With this increased demand on breathing out and not having time to breathe in, the same kinds of physiological outcomes of improper breathing are being experienced by teachers. Stress is at an all-time high. And look, I understand. I mean, a Gallup poll showed that teaching is one of the most stressful occupations in the US, next to only nursing. The stress of teachers, however, in turn, leads to both student mental health impact and teacher burnout. Our teachers are dropping out of the profession at an alarming rate, which is dramatically increasing inequity and inequality in teaching and learning, particularly for low SES and rural areas. NPR did a recent survey of teachers. All my colleagues feel broken, one respondent said. Another said, this has been the hardest year of my life. And a third said, I feel this sense of guilt that I'm not good enough as a teacher or a mother. This has led schools to add mental health workers for both teachers and students. So now as you're listening, you might find yourself in one of two camps. You may not be stressed at all, and that may be because you have great breathing in skills, or you may find yourself like many of the teachers surveyed and you feel burnt out. In either case, we wanted to host this webinar to say both are okay. If you're feeling great, keep doing what you're doing and find ways to help others around you. But on the other hand, if you're feeling stressed and tired, that's okay too, and we want to help. Now, for full disclosure, we as a team spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to help. In other words, we get the irony here. I mentioned the NPR survey of teachers, and a lot of teachers said, okay, they're so exhausted that even self-care feels like more work. So how do we actually help you and give recommendations without it feeling like more work? Well, one option was to let you know about the self-care wheel. If you haven't checked this out, consider spending time with this. It's a great reminder of the importance of the self as more than just a collection of professional duties. It has some wonderful suggestions for things to do just to relax this summer. Search self-care wheel and you'll find the resource. But a second option, and the one we chose, was to focus today on breathing in. As Eric suggested, we're going to give you 3 broad recommendations for how you can spend this summer breathing in. But the best part is we're not just going to give you 3 recommendations, we're going to actually help you achieve those. We're going to help you connect to others, and we're going to give you opportunities to earn additional CEUs by spending time breathing in this summer, just by spending time taking care of yourself and renewing your passion for teaching. So with that introduction, let me jump right into the first important concept and or recommendation for breathing in, the importance of getting the right mindset. It's funny, right? I mean, the truth is that it's probably one of the things we tell ourselves or catch ourselves telling our students and even our own children all the time. But the truth is that with the stress of COVID, most teachers struggled with having the right mindset. Research showed us that they struggled in 3 important ways. First, they struggled with having a positive attitude. And don't get me wrong, who could blame them? but their positivity suffered for very specific pedagogic reasons. They viewed COVID as this great big negative interruption to their lives, and one that required them to use technologies in ways that, quite honestly, many were unprepared for. They developed a mindset of just wanting to return back to quote unquote normal. But conversely, some teachers actually did look for the positive out of last year, and they saw it as a grand experiment. They wrote down reflections of things that went well and that they didn't want to lose when they did return next year. They surrounded themselves, by the way, with others who also had a very, very positive attitude. Second, mindset was about recognizing that they weren't and aren't perfect. And again, much of like what we teach our students, they realized they could learn a lot, and even their students could learn a lot from them simply by recognizing the importance of learning from making mistakes. And finally, while I mentioned that a lot of teachers are feeling burnt out, surveys showed that one reason they're staying in the profession is because of their love of students. So one teacher said, we're pulled in so many different directions from outside forces. Teaching students is wonderful, but it's all the quote unquote other that is exhausting. So part of developing a great mindset is refocusing one's attention on the students that you're returning to and desiring the consistency that a teacher brings. So recognizing who you are and the role that you have in a student's life, not just what you teach them, is an important part of breathing in. So how do you develop the right mindset? Well, one thing that has worked well is to spend time this summer learning something new. Okay, here I go again, giving you more work. Well, research has showed that learning something new doesn't have to be academic. So if you want to go study Greek this summer, go ahead. But you can also learn how to knit, learn how to dance, learn how to do a cannonball in a swimming pool. Learning anything new increases self-efficacy, and it puts you back in the mind as a learner, recognizing it's okay to fail. And isn't it great to have teachers there to help us out? So Angela, I've just given an example of self-efficacy and learning something new, but what else do we need to know about developing the right mindset, and how have you specifically seen this play out?
So Rick, thank you. I think that the more intentional you are with developing your mindset, the better. We can talk ourselves into doing things, or we can talk ourselves out of doing things. And just like this slide here, it's a slide where you have a teacher that is struggling with being able to see what he or she is capable of doing. And so they're telling themselves, I need to teach using the textbooks. I need to teach to the test. I don't have enough resources. I don't know how I'm going to get all these things in. And so it's all negative self-talk. And so we do have to train ourselves to have that positive self-talk. And I think the more that we get into the practice of having that positive self-talk to reach our goals, then the better. And so we really want to have a mindset where you're saying things like, okay, I can network and connect with others that have the resources that I need. I can figure out who do I need to go to in order to get help with this particular thing. I can let go of my need to have control. I don't need to have full control. I just need to know how to manage. I can find ways to change even under adversity. And so a positive mindset helps with pushing us forward through struggles. And so the more positive we are, even if you have to have a mantra or affirmation to get you through the day, it definitely helps. And this also trickles down to your children in the classroom. So the more positive you are about situations, the more you're actually able to handle difficult situations. Because if we come to it with a negative mindset, then whatever behavior we exemplify in order to intervene within the situation, it's going to end up being negative. And so we want to try to approach all our situations with just training ourselves to have a more of a positive outlook on situations. And you can look up locus of control, and there's different types of surveys and rating forms you can take to figure out what your locus of control is. And locus of control deals with whether or not you feel as though external things determine your outcomes, or if internally, if you have control over things that happen to you. So are you the person that says, well, I'm not going to try because I never win anyway? Or are you the person that says, I'm going to try because today just might be my day, right? So that's mindset. And so I think the more you start to get in touch with where you are in a situation like that, then the better. And then not only are you able to motivate yourself, but you're going to have even more strategies to help with motivating your children, because our children have to have that growth mindset. And sometimes they feel defeated and they won't even start work because they've decided that they're not going to be able to conquer that. And so I think it's so important that as educators that we're just constantly working on our mindset to help get us through difficult situations and struggles and challenges. Lucille, have you seen something like this in EIG grants or when people are having conversations with you about the EIG grant?
I can say 2 words, Heidi Short, Sarah Sabaticki. But in all honesty and without educators, both Heidi and Sarah, who teach 4th and 5th grade at DeWitt Elementary in Coteau Falls, have written several EIG applications and have been awarded all of them. 2 of these grants get in the zone of discovery of strengths of science and self-confidence, and the second, Outdoor Black Tiger Zen Den, focusing on an eclectic mix of learners and their teachers. While cultivating a garden and enhancing indoor and outdoor learning spaces, teachers and students are thinking outside the box. With yoga planned for this year and enhancing a second area outside the school, students and teachers are creating spaces for reflecting, as you said, and renewing and learning about self, as Rick had said, and the world around them. Heidi and Sarah have been delighted in the fact that everyone, especially post-COVID, wants to get outside and dig and discuss and learn. I often drive by that school to see all of these kids outside, and it just tugs at your heartstrings because they're so excited about learning. These 2 educators have encouraged many of their colleagues to write applications, and in effect, have changed the cultural learning of this elementary school, which includes students of many different languages. Why do I share this vignette with you? Well, these teachers are willing to help you, any of their colleagues in other school systems to enhance the learning experience. Quoting from their grants, this learning and meditation space has been an opportunity for students and adults to take much needed breaks, especially this year, from technology. Secondly, after seeing the excitement that student staff are experiencing with our previous grants, staff members have joined our grant writing team and have also been inspired to write grants on their own. And these 2 evaluation team members can know from experience how many we get from DeWitt. Heidi and Sarah would love to discuss their journey with any teachers interested in growth and self-awareness through outdoor and indoor learning spaces. But in the beginning, before they began this design of these 2 outdoor spaces and this indoor discovery zone, they just simply walked around their building. They talked with custodians because we all know custodians and secretaries are the most important in our buildings. And they started rethinking spaces with a focus on a positive attitude and growth mindset, finding these areas both inside and outside their building. You too can do this very simple walk around to discover the spaces inside and outside your own buildings, corners for calming, places that kids can go and learn when they need to be alone. These discovery zones or outdoor learning labs, before you leave this summer, think about ways that will enhance this growth mindset for you personally, as Eric shares some of his experiences.
Yeah, Lucille, I love hearing about our EIG recipients. Just the practice of writing a grant shows positive mindset because you're looking at challenges as opportunities. And then you use this great EIG program to bring those innovations to the classroom. It's awesome. So thanks for sharing those. Resource. So instead, we took a different approach, right? My first assignment with my business students was, hey, let's look at what the challenges are around us, not just with us, but with, I'm muted. Am I unmuted now? Okay, hi everybody. Sorry about muting that. I'm unmuted now. Sorry about that. I was going strong too. Well, I'll go back to the beginning. So thanks, Lucille, for sharing those grant recipients. I I just love hearing about our EIG recipients. The practice of writing a grant is an example of that positive mindset, looking at challenges as opportunities. So thanks for sharing that. What I found this year more than ever is that positivity and mindset is contagious. In March of 2020, when we went online and everybody else went online, my first lesson with my business students was to take stock of our challenges and then complete an inventory of the resources and abilities that we actually had. We asked them to recognize our limitations, which there are a lot of them, especially with COVID protocols. And then we worked to use our resources to overcome challenges. My students developed a 300 challenge, which was to develop 300 masks, feed 300 people, and give 300 letters to senior citizens that were isolated. And not only did they meet those goals, but they exceeded all of them. And it was incredible to watch, but I noticed that that mindset and that practice and that framing I did with the students actually had a positive impact on me as an educator. I too started to use that same framework when I was thinking about the world around me, how to frame challenges as opportunities. I want to touch on something you mentioned too, Rick. This summer, I, like everybody else, I'm really excited to reset. And learning something new is a really great way for me to reset. Not only does it put me in the mindset of a student, but actually I glean a lot of things for my teaching, even when I'm not intending to do so. My go-to is podcasts. You know, if we come back to technology, I love podcasts because they're passive. I can jog, or I can work in the yard, or I can paint, or I can just sit there. And I learn something new, normally completely unrelated to what I'm trying to do or to my profession. But there's so many others. You can do TED Talks, you can do MOOCs, which are those edX online courses, masterclass, learn how to cook, more active things. And what I found is when I do any of this stuff, I actually can't turn the teacher off. I'm still a teacher. And so even though I'm being a student, I'm gleaning things that find their way into my classroom and make me a better classroom teacher. So Rick, let's move on to the second point. What's the second concept you have for us that's helpful for teachers to practice as they focus on self-care this summer?
Yeah, so I love this. Just to go back real quick, I mean, I love this idea that positive attitude is it's an action. I mean, it's a mindset, it's an action, and you get out and you do it, and I love it. And teachers will often feel guilty about learning something that they feel like is not necessarily directly related to what they're teaching. Right. It's okay, because the way our brain is wired, it resets us, it refreshes us. So that's awesome. So the second concept we wanted to share today is the concept of self-awareness. So self-awareness, according to Castle, is the ability to understand one's emotions, thoughts, values, and to recognize how that impacts behavior. Self-awareness is not only an important concept for SEL, but it's an important part of resiliency. So to fit the theme today, self-awareness is a critical component of breathing in. Let me give you an example of why it's important. If I ask you what you thought of what happened during COVID, particularly during remote instruction, many of you and many teachers, according to global surveys, would tell me that you were concerned and are concerned about learning that was lost, favorite word, lost in math, literacy, and other content areas. But Jen Schaefer, a 7th grade teacher, asked her students that same question. And you won't have time to read all the Post-it notes, but what you should quickly realize is that content loss wasn't what the students were most concerned about. They missed interaction, communication, innovation, and dare I even say discipline and external motivation from the teacher. Okay, fine. But what does that have to do with self-awareness? Well, in a different study, they built on this and then asked students their opinions about successful teachers during the pandemic. The researchers found several, probably not surprising outcomes. For instance, students wanted positive, calm, and empathetic faculty. While the research results are interesting, perhaps what's more important is talking about whether or not teachers had enough self-awareness to be able to recognize this in themselves and in others. So in other words, to quote an old philosophical problem, let's see if I can get this out. How do you know you don't know if you don't know you don't know, right? So self-awareness is an important tool for asking if you're this kind of teacher. Researchers have found that teachers who read, particularly about others' experiences, those who build portfolios of their experiences, documenting both good and bad that happen, teachers who set reasonable goals for themselves, not too high or not too low, and perhaps most importantly, teachers who engage with others through frequent conversations build self-awareness to help them improve their resiliency. So Angela, I mean, inherent in what I just said are probably some great activities for teachers this summer. For instance, reading, talking with others, documenting through portfolios and journals. Interestingly, these are also great ways for students to build self-awareness and resiliency. But where and how have you seen successes with teachers and students in building self-awareness?
So Rick, with teachers and students, self-awareness is so important because self-awareness actually gives you like a starting point. So like once we become aware, like as relates to any type of situation, it gives us a starting point on what do I need to do next? Like, what are my next steps? And so when teachers develop their self-awareness and their willingness to look at their own behaviors and how they're affecting students, they can begin to start making changes. And so like even myself as a principal, I do not do a lot of screaming or yelling, only if I have to. And if I do let you know, if I do raise my voice, you know that I'm like super serious. Like if, like it's not often that I raise my voice because then it becomes ineffective. And so you have to become aware of your emotions and the way that you're feeling and the ways that certain situations trigger certain things within. And so that way you can develop coping strategies so that you're not taking out your frustrations on students. And so you know the particular students that come into the classroom where your body starts to feel hot and on fire, right? And so because like you will say something to you and they may always have a little, smart little comment, or they'll say something because they know what they're trying to trigger. And so you have to have a strategy in place. You have to have your go-to words or your go-to phrase that you're going to say so that you won't act on the way that your body is feeling and whatever those emotions are. Like that is just so important. And so I have this article here that just has like really good points here. And it just says that being proactive, taking proactive steps to identify and diffuse my own emotional triggers. Like we have to have strategies to diffuse our own emotional triggers. Helping youth with emotional and behavioral disabilities begin with understanding ourselves. And then that's just not students with emotional and behavior problems, but it's all students, because you never know what children are bringing in each day. And so if we're aware of where we are, that's going to help us interact with students. And I think it's so important for us to get in tune and get in touch with our students as they're coming into our buildings and into the classrooms each day. We did some work with zones of regulation. That's, really understanding the mood of the child once they enter, and that helps you decide on what type of resources do I need to provide this child so he or she can have a productive day. It may be that they had an argument at home with a sibling and they're coming in the school. They just need somebody to talk to real quick to diffuse the situation, or they just got in trouble getting out the car, or they're hungry. You never know what the situation is. But I just think that it's so important for us to have some type of tools to gauge students once they enter the classroom. And then we need to know where our mindsets are and where we are, so that we can also reach out to our friends and our colleagues in the building to help support us wherever we are with our emotions. It says here that teachers often inadvertently neglect to recognize and build on students' positive behaviors and strengths. And that's because we're so caught up in trying to get them to do, whatever it is that we need them to do. And sometimes we just need to just take a step back. And it may not be that the child can't do it or they don't have the ability to do it, but it's just something else that's going on with them that they're choosing to shut down and not work. And I think that we can't allow ourselves to get so frustrated with them that we are interacting with them in a negative way. And so we have to be in tune and in touch with our emotions and the way that certain things make us feel so that we can have the appropriate strategies. We did some work too with teaching love and logic. Teaching love and logic is a wonderful resource, and it gives you actual words you can use with students who are defiant and who choose to not follow direction, so that we are stating things in a more positive way. Also, we must develop effective strategies for regularly monitoring and managing our own stress, just like you said. We have to have ways. At Mason, with one of our community partners, we created a VIP lounge for our teachers. It's a teacher workroom, but it's like really nice. And sometimes you just have to take a moment for yourself. And I think it's so important that, like I said, you either have a friend or you have a place that you can go. I think it's important when it's time for lunch, you actually take your 30-minute lunch and take that moment so that you can regroup and get yourself back together. But being self-aware is just so important. It could either enhance what's happening in your classroom, or it can destroy what's happening in your classroom if you're not self-aware, because our words can either empower students and encourage them, or our words can discourage them. So it's so important that you're self-aware so that you're saying words that are encouraging children and not discouraging them. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Lucille and ask Lucille, what kind of work or things have you seen in EIG grants as it relates to self-awareness?
Well, it's funny that you brought up those points and we hadn't even met to discuss that, because I think of the EIG grant entitled "It's All the Rage." The acronym means Regulation, Access to Growing Emotionally. Christy Yurchek, occupational therapist, and Edie Steiner, music therapist, the lead teachers, have a core of a team who were trained using the grant money for innovative, focused collaboration between therapeutic and teaching staff to provide rigorous instruction at Bridges Learning Center in Akron Public School, which serves students who have experienced the most physical and emotional trauma and require significant social emotional support. Self-awareness and team building were the key components of this first year of the grant. And here's my commercial. You can come to us 3 years for an idea if you prove your idea. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. The bridge to being an effective educator with an SEL lens is a direct outcome of our intent going PD, commented one educator. A voluntary after school discussion group was begun this year during the height of COVID, because those teachers needed to be with each other and sharing strategies on trauma-informed topics. Teachers have experienced through this EIG grant a sense of identity, worth, and dignity, and empowerment as they model trauma-sensitive practices. One teacher shared that is so helpful that they receive a weekly newsletter that reminds them, as Angela said, to take care of self and to pick a buddy that I can check with every day, who's not going to judge me, who's going to lift me up and help me move forward. Even though all of our students are on IEPs, every one of the 140 at Bridges are on IEPs. We know, and they have a teacher retention that's out of sight. So what does that say? We know that through our extensions from this grant, we can help one another as we teach our students the regulatory tools provided by GAR. I feel that I am more aware, says one teacher, of who I am and how I can help my students. That's why 11 of us got together as learners to write year 2 of It's All the Rage. And the 9-member team, of course, said, yes. A great thing to take away from this grant is the concept, simple concept, of a voluntary buddy system that you can always go to and to discuss any situation without being judged. You too can think about having a colleague that you can meet with to share ideas and concerns as you end this year like no other. Certainly Eric, who is a fantastic mentor, I could go on, has much to share on this topic.
You guys hit most of it, but like you all mentioned, I found that virtual coffees and virtual lunches, and then once we got back in the school, physical coffee and lunches were really, really helpful for me, because I was dealing with emotions that I'd never experienced before. Like, I was lonely. I'm not a lonely person on a daily basis, but I felt a new emotion and didn't know how to cope with it. And meeting with people reinforced 2 things. One, I'm not alone, and 2, we can work to overcome this challenge together. And that was really, really valuable to me in my mental health. So I think about talking about what you guys were saying in the classroom. And I think about the mood meter idea that we actually brought up in our last webinar. After hearing about the idea, I actually started to do it in my own classroom on a daily basis. I use Slido, which is a technology plugin for Google Slides that just generates, you can generate surveys and send it out to kids. But that one's a paid one, but there are free ones too, called Pear Deck and Pull Everywhere, others as well. And so every day when they walked in on the welcome slide, there was a simple question to ask them how they were doing that day, and give them an opportunity to share their mood with me. And so I would take just a couple of minutes, normally 1 or 2 minutes, just to talk about the feedback I got, the data of that. And sometimes it even impacted my lesson, like you were saying, Angela, like it changed the way I was going to teach that day. Maybe, a 45-minute lecture changed to something that's a little more, engaging that day. But one day in particular, my seniors, their moods were really down. Something, I think homecoming had just gotten canceled or something like that. And we spent 20 minutes discussing and mourning all the things our seniors had lost. We just made a list of all the things that they lost. And it was hard, but it was cathartic, it was healing. And the students afterwards were like, thank you for recognizing that what we're going through is hard and that our emotions are real. So all that to say, I'm all in on the mood meter, even with 12th graders. I feel like it's something that people think is elementary, but I'm all in on it. Another cool idea that Rick actually sent to me was this idea of making a comic strip of self-portraits with different emotions. Again, this sounds very elementary. I actually started doing some self-portraits, so I could talk with authenticity today. I'm not a drawer. But the idea is you take 4 panels and you draw yourself with 4 different emotions. As I'm sitting there drawing my stick figure self and drawing the different emotions, what I found is that I actually became more aware of what I was feeling and why I was feeling it, what the circumstances were that surrounded it, that I didn't expect to have as a middle-aged man, these new discoveries. So I was surprised about how it impacted me and even leveled me out and made me think about ways to regulate that. So I highly recommend it. I'm not going to show you my pictures, but I highly recommend it. Try it at home. Maybe, it's a arts and crafts with the kids or a journaling activity. I think you'll be surprised at how it works. And then maybe try it with your students when they return to the classroom. I think it could be a fun way to kind of start thinking about all that they've been through when they return to the classroom. So I think we're going to be sharing that resource with you guys, but I want to kick it back over to you, Rick, to move on to our final concept. What's the final thing that you think will be helpful for teachers as they focus on self-care this summer?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning the resource list. So thank you for mentioning the comic resource. So at the end, when we have our survey, we have an opportunity for teachers to earn additional CEUs by doing a number of different activities to refresh and renew this summer. And that would be one of them. So that's great. So this third component is probably my favorite. It's about being connected and or networked with others. And being connected is probably one of the best ways to breathe in. And so for some of you, the best way for me to describe this is to talk about the 6 degrees of Lois Weisberg. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, wait a minute, he just spoke. But wasn't I really supposed to talk about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? The 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, as you know, is this game where you name any movie or actor or actress and you try to see how many steps it takes you to get to Kevin Bacon. Well, Malcolm Gladwell, some of you know from his books like The Tipping Point, wrote a fascinating connectivity story. You can find it online called The 6 Degrees of Lois Weisberg. Think of it as more of an academic version of the Kevin Bacon game. And in that New Yorker piece, he talks about the importance of not just what we know, but also who we know. So for instance, I can ask how many of you have taught in Poland? And by the way, I didn't know this till I moved to Ohio, that there's actually a Poland, Ohio. I don't mean that Poland. How many of you actually have taught in the country? My guess is that many of you have not, but I did. I taught in Kraków, Poland. So now if I change my question and I say, how many of you know somebody who taught in Kraków, Poland? You could all raise your hands and say, yes, I know somebody now. So now you're 1 degree of separation away. Well, why does that matter? Well, if you wanted to get connected to somebody in Kraków or you wanted to talk to somebody who taught in Kraków, now you have that power or that knowledge or that connectivity at your hands. And just for fun, I got to stick with this metaphor for a second. I can ask how many of you have met Kevin Bacon. And I just lost some of you because you're either dancing or singing Footloose or whatever. But I actually did have a chance to meet Kevin Bacon at the concert at the Kent Stage. So now you're 1 degree separated from someone who met Kevin Bacon. By the way, he has no idea who I am or that I exist, so don't ask for connections. But the point is that social connections matter. Even in education, yes, absolutely. So this is an image of what a connected educator looks like. They use various means to be connected, not just to those in the same building, but around the world. When the pandemic hit, we immediately saw that teachers who had structured professional development succeeded. But it may surprise you to find out that teachers who were connected and heavily networked even if they didn't have formal PD, were just as successful. Connected teachers not only got just-in-time unstructured PD and ideas for teaching and learning during the pandemic, but they also found social support for continuing to be positive, continuing to self-monitor and be self-aware. So, Angela, an obvious implication for teachers is to assess, build, maybe rebuild their social networks, take us up on our offer, fill out the survey. We're going to connect them with teachers that have like interests. But I want to know more about what you've seen with connectivity and both why it matters for teachers and students.
Right. Yes. So our company that we keep definitely makes a difference in all the things that we talked about, our mindset, self-awareness, taking on challenges, the way that we actually approach life in general. And so it's just so important that we look at who's in our circle because it matters, right? So if I'm having a bad day and I have friends that are just all negative, then they'll probably continue to help me have a bad day by saying, you're right, you deserve better. I don't even know because I don't think that way, but I just know that even in college, I remember I had two friends that were always negative. Like when we would get together, all they did was talk about people, like always, like everybody people watch, but this was like all the time. They always had something negative to say. And then like I started feeling heavy like when I was around them. It was hard for me to like keep myself up. So we know that happiness is based on happenings. And so the things that were happening with me when I was with those two people didn't feel good. So I had to cut myself from them. And I had to find a more positive group of people to surround myself with. And so that's the same with students. It's the same with teachers. You want to be around people who are going to help with uplifting, pushing you forward as an individual, as a person within your profession. And so you want to stay connected and network with the people that are going to help move you ahead, but it's vice versa. You want to be able to give as much as you receive as well. And we do that by connecting ourselves with people who are going to help with moving us forward. Same thing with students, birds of a feather, what do? They flock together. And so it's our job to make sure that we're connecting with people who are helping with making a positive difference in our lives and in the lives of the children that come through our doors every day. You can have one person that turns a building toxic with their attitudes and with the denial of being self-aware in situations and tearing students down to the point where kids are just acting up and they don't feel like anybody cares about them because of all these negative things that are being put into them. So children are like a bank, right? Whatever you put in is what you get out. You can't put in a bunch of negativity and think you're going to have positive children running around loving one another. So we have to make sure that we come into the building and that we're connecting ourselves with people who have the same goals and mindset as we do, so that when we do find ourselves in a situation where we're stuck, that they're going to help with pushing and moving us forward. They're not going to say, well, too bad for you. Better luck next time. No, we need people who are going to encourage us and who will. I want someone too that be honest with me, give me critical feedback, not put me down, not beat me down, but give me critical feedback that I can use to help with moving me forward in my profession and in life. So our circle is so important. And so even this summer, look at who are the people, who are your 5 most closest people that you're connected with, and what kind of things do they contribute to you in your life, and what kind of things do you contribute to them in their life? I think that's so important. And so these are the same kind of things that we need to make sure that we're talking to our children about, because relationship matters. You can get with the wrong group of people and get yourself in a situation that one decision can change the rest of your life. And so you want to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the right people so that you too are making, good choices, and they're going to help you make good choices, right? I always tell them your friend is not going to talk you into doing something that is that friends help friends make good choices, is what I tell the children. And so we want to make sure that we're being a good friend to one another, and we want to teach our children to be good friends to each other. So Lucille, as we talk about being connected, and I heard you talk about bridges and how at the end of the school day, how they get together and they have that circle. I think that's so important. Can you talk more about the things that you've seen as it relates to collaboration and teachers sticking together?
Thanks. Both Rick and Angela always teach me things. We're always learning. Connecting to our students and colleagues is extremely important, as both have already shared. One example, and this is taking things in a different direction. And this is a really unique, and it's being implemented this year. One example from 2 EIGs written together by North High School in Akron, the most culturally diverse high school in Ohio, and Hudson High School, a rather homogeneous high school. My voice, my story, myself, exploring my identity and valuing yours. Because when we're talking with one another, value has to be part of that. Was written by science and ELL teacher Dana Starbaji and instructional specialist Patrick DeAndrea from North, and Nairi Wilkerson, DEI coordinator, and Christina Woolley, curriculum coordinator from Hudson. These educators worked in tandem on these two separate but equal kind of grants. But this idea didn't start there. When Nairi and Christina reached out to me last August, because they're uber about writing a grant, sharing their ideas concerning diversity, I loved their idea and asked them, what if I connected you to these teachers from North, who are fabulous also, who have this rich diversity, and that connected trust between two diverse schools began. It's really cool. You all, those of you who know me, I get emotional. I cry at grocery store openings. But this is really cool. This idea was unique because it fosters relationships as a key to building tolerance, acceptance, and breaking down walls of prejudice, bias, and discrimination. Freshman students and their teachers will learn about themselves. As Angela said, I got to know myself, while also learning about students who are very dissimilar from themselves. Through an initial field trip to Bath Nature Center and subsequent field trips to Karamu, etc., and exploring and creating and sharing art that speaks to their identity and listening to a variety of speakers throughout the year. All of this is funded by EIGGAR, with a culminating identity dinner, not funded by us, at the end of the school year. These freshmen, as well as their teacher teams, will understand who they are and develop a greater sense of empathy for others, and continue these relationships, hopefully throughout their high school experience. The cadre of students and teachers will then be working the following year with the next year's freshmen, all with this goal of learning about self and appreciating others. We can create a more caring and empathetic society is the goal of these two grants. I'd love to be the catalyst for you, or any of you who'd like to discuss teaching and learning with other schools, other districts. Today, you will take our self-assessment survey. You can see how you want to connect with others. We have given you many ways that you can connect on your own, or if you want, and there's no pressure, if you feel you'd like to connect with any of us, we'd love to talk with you. Now, Eric, we know how much you connect with this whole community. Do you want to share a few things about mentoring and connectivity?
Yeah, thanks, Lucille. This is a passion of mine, mainly because it's the pursuit of this that has led me to meet this wonderful group of people and many of the people that are on this webinar right now. I was not a connected teacher for the vast majority of my career, but in the last 6 years, I took on the business program and had no idea what I was doing. I was helpless, right? So I just started reaching out to people because if I hadn't, I would have failed. And what I found, which was remarkable to me, is that even if I didn't have a plan for how to collaborate, they wanted to meet with me and they wanted to help me. And then by the end of that meeting, when I didn't have a plan going in and I'm just saying, tell me what I need to know, I oftentimes already had an initiative and partners with that initiative to implement my classroom. It was incredible. And it's actually that brought me to the GAR conference for the first time. It's that has led me to start a consortium for entrepreneurship in Northeast Ohio, because every time I meet with other people who love kids and love the classroom, I walk out inspired and great things happen. I model this with my students too. They all have mentors, so we connect them with people. We ask them to intentionally reach out to community partners. All the time, we're trying to reach outside of our walls. And again, we don't already have fully formed ideas on how it's going to happen. But when we come willing to learn and engage in collaboratives with a collaborative spirit, we walk out of that room often with a new idea on what we can implement in the classroom. So it's really incredible. But collaboration, or connectivity, I should say, is not always active. There's passive ways to get connected, and technology has been really, really helpful with that. And COVID has sort of led more people to turn to technology for that connectivity. Even, getting guest speakers from around the world is possible now with sort of the literacy that people have with technology. Although I don't use Twitter myself, I know many people that do and build really incredible connections with people. And just by looking at their dashboard, they can quickly get inspired and see lots of ideas and get connected to more research. So again, it's passive, the connection comes to them. I'm old school, I love emails. I think I might be the only person that does. So I actually subscribe to email newsletters as a passive way for me to connect. Edutopia, Call to Pedagogy, many others. I get a once a week condensed, hey, here's what we're thinking about. Normally it's relevant, it's just in time PD, because they're thinking about the same things I'm thinking about. And if I like it, or if it engages me, I can go deeper with it. So I love that as a way to do it. I use LinkedIn a lot for this, where I can connect with people. What I love about LinkedIn is I can actually reach out, follow up with them, and message people as on my wall I see, different things, incredible things happening. But the key for me with connectivity is I feel like we always feel like we have to have a plan to connect. And I don't think that's real. I think if you get together with other people, whether virtually or in person, and you both are willing to learn from each other, incredible things can happen. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Angela to close us out. I think that's the end of our three things. Angela, can you tell us a bit more about our next steps for our listeners?
Absolutely, I can, Eric. We're going to have future webinars, which is exciting. We want these webinars to be meaningful for everyone that's viewing today. And in order to do so, we need to know what your interests are. So we want your feedback. So please make sure that at the end, when the survey is put into the chat, that you fill out that survey so that we can get information from you. And so in order to get the feedback, and in order for us to give you credit, if you want CEUs, you must complete the survey. So the survey is going to, again, be placed into the chat, and you'll have the opportunity to complete that. We're going to also give you an opportunity to get 2 additional surveys. I believe that Dr. Rick spoke about the additional 2 CEUs that you'll be able to earn. We strongly believe in the importance of self-care, and we want to give you the credit this summer. And so you're going to get credit for taking care of yourself, which is awesome. So on the survey, we've asked you if you're interested in earning the additional credits. If so, please make sure that you mark that on the survey, and you'll have the opportunity to complete the activities. You'll receive a PDF with the list of items that you could do to choose from. So it's kind of like a choice board. Isn't that awesome? So you'll have a choice board to choose from in order to decide what you want to do for those additional CEUs. So please note that there's no commitment simply by asking for the list. So you can ask for the list and still decide whether or not you want to move forward with getting the 2 CEUs, and that's okay. While we won't point out everything we didn't point out everything on the list as we went through how you can get them, I'm going to just talk about some of the things that you could do. So some of the activities may be connecting with some professionals. And so on your screen, you see Lucille, Lucille Esposito. She works with the GAR Educator Initiative Grant Program that you've heard about today, and she's shared some of the grants with you. You can earn CEU simply by arranging a virtual or face-to-face meeting with her and to discuss possible EIG grant submissions. And so while the grants are not due until February, and while there's no commitment to submit a grant, even if you meet with her, this is one way that you can earn CEUs by brainstorming, sitting with her, talking about some possible things that you could do to get you energized for next school year. On the survey, there's also an opportunity to check areas of interest for future webinars. If you're strongly interested in that topic, you can also earn CEUs by having a conversation with a past EIG recipient related to that topic. So you simply mark that box and Lucille will get you connected with someone. You can meet virtually or face-to-face, whichever is the most comfortable for you to get those CEUs. The third option is for some of you who are interested in implementing social emotional learning activities with your staff or students. You can reach out to Dr. Eric Merkel, who is one of our lead psychologists in the Akron Public Schools, who works in our pupil adjustment program in the Student Services Department and with the Special Education Department. He's very knowledgeable and resourceful. You can exchange emails with him or have a phone call where you can ask questions about practices for implementing social emotional learning within your classroom or within your building. So finally, Tom McNeil is a technology specialist who works at Kent State University in the Kent State Research Center for Educational Technology. He works with teachers and students across Summit County to help them integrate technology into teaching and learning. You have the opportunity this summer to start an email or phone conversation with Tom to talk about innovative technologies. Here, we are not talking about technical or functional problems. How do I get my laptop or stop crashing? That's not what we're talking about. How do I mute or unmute with the space bar? I just learned that the other day. That's not the kind of thing we're talking about. We're talking about interests you have that you want insight on next steps. For instance, Tom, what are you using for robotics for elementary classrooms? Or Tom, how can we talk about what tools you're using to help students learn how to record movies? So something that's going to bump you up on that DOK as it relates to integrating technology into your instruction. Those are the kind of things that Tom McNeil can support you with. And then I want you guys to know that these are just a few examples. You're going to get more examples if you complete the survey and say that you want CEUs, then you'll receive the PDF with the list of things that you can choose from. You'll receive your choice board for CEUs. So with that, I'm going to end and let you go and complete the survey. So we're going to have that survey placed in the chat. It's just popped up there now. So please click on that survey. It's very important, even if you're not interested in earning additional CEUs, as it helps us send you credit for participation today. We still want to get your feedback and input on future things that we can do our webinars on. And we want you to know that we're going to stay on right now. We're going to stay on while you're completing the survey. And in about 5 minutes, we'll open up a time for questions for anyone who wants to stay and ask us more about today's topics or future steps. So thank you again for joining us today. We appreciate you and we thank you for taking your time on a Thursday afternoon to join us in this conversation.